everyone. Thank you for joining us today at Life and In Between podcast. Today, I am so excited because I have the honor and privilege of having two wonderful power couples joining us today. Today, I have John McMahon and I also have Lou Lewis joining us today. Now, let me tell you a little bit background story. John reached out to me, and when I read his background story, I said immediately, I have to have him on the podcast. And when I found out more information on Lou, I said, my gosh, I need the two of them on today. So for those that have their cup of coffee, their kombucha, or their tecito, their tea, and I have my mint tea today here. For those, get ready because we're going to get hot and steamy here, and we're going to dig into some really interesting conversations. So let me tell you a little bit. Just going to give a little background story on Lou, and I'm going to give you a background story on John. So John, from what I've read was, if I'm not mistaken, in 1984, you were in a psychiatric hospital. You were given only 6 months to live if you continue to use alcohol and drugs.
Yes.
And what I read was that you did an amazing transformation from becoming from being an alcoholic to becoming a doctor, a
Yeah.
therapist, and your life
Yeah.
shifted and changed. And then
Yeah.
in this process, Lou, you have a very wonderful, interesting backstory. You're the daughter of a pastor, songwriter, singer. You also are a therapist as well, and you have a beautiful, interesting story, a love story that I know our listeners are going to love and enjoy. So, without further ado, John, I'm going to let you dive into and tell us a little bit about your story, your journey, because I know some listeners are right now needing to hear that.
Okay, where would you like me to start?
So that moment, well, wherever you feel comfortable starting, but I kind of want to start in that moment when you were given that news or when that aha moment said, I have to stop, I have to put down the drink. And you made that decision of transforming and just saying, I have to move forward from this.
Okay, well, I was in Glasgow in a psychiatric hospital. I'd gone through the DTs, and that's the delirium tremens, which is a very severe form of withdrawal from alcohol. And it can be fatal. So I was detoxed under medical supervision. The psychiatrist then said to me, I would be dead in 6 months if I didn't stop taking alcohol and drugs. And for many people, they think, oh, that's what stopped him. But it wasn't. It really wasn't what stopped me. I mean, I did not have a great fear of dying because there was many times during my alcohol and drug use, I would have been quite happy to die. Oh, not quite happy, but I was prepared. I was prepared to die. And sometimes it felt more appealing than the way I was living at that moment in time, because I was a bit of a tortured soul at the time. What really stopped me was looking in the mirror and seeing this thing that was looking back at me. Because I had become this horrible, selfish person that would have tramped over the top of anybody to get alcohol or drugs. I really didn't take anybody else's feelings into consideration by this time. And I hated who I was. But deep inside myself, I really felt, but this isn't me. This is not me. It's me today, but it's not me. And I started to change. And what I felt was going to happen was that I was going to basically join the elephant's graveyard. I was going to sit in a corner somewhere and be miserable till I died. But that was more appealing than going back to the person that I was before. And I went into Alcoholics Anonymous, hated it with a passion, looked down on everybody at it because I was far too good for Alcoholics Anonymous. I was among these losers. And all these losers were, making lives for themselves. And eventually I started, I was okay. I was 3 months, I wouldn't say sober because I wasn't sober, but it was 3 months abstinent. I had the longest time I had been in my adult life, the longest time without a drink. And I had been at 3 AA meetings that day. That's how screwed up I was. I was terrified of alcohol. And I was in my flat. My wife had left me. I was in serious debt. The house was sold to pay off some of these debts. And I was in my house, and having come back from the third AA meeting that day, and my head was screaming. I was desperate for a drink. I felt if I didn't get a drink, I would go mad. I would fall into this black hole somewhere, and I would never come back out again. That's the way it kind of takes you. You know, there's a feeling of falling into the void, the panic. And people had been telling me that I must do the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I thought, yeah, that's for you, but it's not for me because I'm better than that, you know. But there I was, and I was in such a state that I decided that maybe I better look at it. And the second step of Alcoholics Anonymous is, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Now, my background is I had been trained to be a priest. I had been in all sorts of Eastern religions. I'd done all sorts of, religious things. So God and I were not in speaking terms as far as I was concerned. And the third step is gave my will over to the care of God as I understood him to be. And people kept saying, you'll not get peace until you do this. And I resisted until that night. And in that night, I said, what's probably the most fervent prayer I've ever said in my life. 3 words. God help me. That was it. And I waited. I thought, okay, what's going to happen? And what happened was nothing. Nothing, as far as I could see. Next day, I was at another AA meeting, and I was talking to one of the people who had advised me, and I was moaning at them about how nothing had happened. And he said to me, did you sleep last night? I said, yeah. He said, did you have a drink? I said, no. He said, do you feel like a drink? And I went, no. And from that day till now, I have never, ever felt that craving. Never. Yeah. So after that, I started to get sober. It wasn't an easy sobriety in the first year. In fact, it was a fairly uneasy sobriety in the first year. I was scared. I was scared to go near pubs. I was scared to go anywhere they were selling alcohol at all, just in case a bottle jumped off the shelf and poured itself down my throat, because that's the way I felt. I had no control. And then I got a year sober, and it was more, people wanted to celebrate. And they said to me, would I come and, celebrate my birthday at this particular group? And I said, is that because I'm so good? And they said, no, because if you can get it, anybody can get it. I thought, well, that wasn't very nice, but it was true. It was true. And after that, I started to look around, and I started to live, because that's what I had life, I started to do things that I had always sat in the pub and talked about going to do tomorrow. Tomorrow I'm going to climb the Scottish mountains, but not today because I'm busy today. I'm drinking today, but tomorrow, and I did that, I said I was going to learn to scuba dive, and I did that, and I dived all over the world. I said I was going to sail around the Greek islands, and I did that. Because what happened now was that my life wasn't taken up with alcohol anymore. I had time, and I had time that I could do other things. But the other thing was that I left school with practically no qualifications at all. But I always knew deep down inside that I was bright. I knew I was clever, because I'd always been top of the class when I wanted to be. But very often I was bottom of the class because I didn't want to be. So I went back to education, and I got a degree in psychology. And then I got a fellowship from the Scottish office at that time. They give 3 away a year, and I got one of them. And I did a PhD, and then I became a lecturer, and then I became a researcher. I published lots of papers. I spoke at conferences. I ended up in the Centre for Alcohol and Drug Studies, where I wrote the course, and it became, I turned that into distance learning, and it became the biggest course in alcohol and drugs in the UK, and I was privileged to be allowed to do these things, and it was a privilege. And do you know, I used to go into work and I'd say to people, don't tell anybody. But they don't need to pay me to do this. I would pay them to allow me to do this, because my life had just turned around. It had a purpose, and I was enjoying it. And not only was I enjoying it, I quite liked myself as well. And that was a big, big change. It was a huge change, because through the program, I begun to sort of make amends about my past. But I'd also made peace with me, made peace with me, the restlessness.
He's continued to make great strides in becoming a lovely person, I have to say.
It was fantastic, because, I felt a bit like Lazarus, that sort of, and I had some friends along the way who helped me, sadly, some of them never made it, They gave me a great gift, which was, enjoying life. But unfortunately, sometimes they didn't get it, So I was the one that was chosen to survive, and that is a privilege, that's a real privilege.
It is. That is, I mean, like, this is like you did a couple of mic drop moments as you were telling your story, and I was touched and moved, and congratulations. And it's a beautiful, touching story in the sense that I know that many people are out there, and listeners are out there, that are thinking that they're not going to be able to put down that bottle, or someone is with a person that is currently drinking, a spouse. My first husband, my ex-husband, was an alcoholic, and unfortunately he did not make it, and he passed away. But I had to leave him because it was a very toxic and horrible roller coaster. So I can relate to being the receiver at the end of what it is to live with an alcoholic, and what that is, and what it does to the family dynamics. I know that, Lou, you have a story to share as well. And you and I can relate to that. And John, thank you for sharing that, because I kind of want to just move into talking about Lou, and then I want to talk about your love story. I want to talk about your love story now. So, Lou, please share, because you and I are simpatico on this. We're very similar. We walked that journey.
We did. Well, background, I'm a pastor's daughter. Figured out somewhere in my teens that there were about 20 other commandments that the church had suddenly made up that didn't seem to be in the Bible, none of which I particularly liked. So I decided I needed to get away. So music was my thing. So I got a scholarship when I was 16 to an arts college, and then went on to the Royal College of Music. And so then I became a singer-songwriter. And I used to describe myself as a contemporary singer, unsuccessfully trying to get away from her classical roots. So you could tell by the songs were very lyrical, and there was a lot of classical kind of runs in it and things. So, and I met my husband, who loved my music, and he became my manager. And so we'd go around. We worked a lot in churches. I was what's called a gospel singer. So we worked a lot in churches, and we'd go away. We'd often work for the whole weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday morning, Sunday night. And so I kind of built up quite a successful career. But what people didn't know is that when we came back, my husband was a binge drinker. So he would kind of hit the bottle for, say, 2 or 3 days at a time. But I knew he loved me very, very dearly. And I knew he hated himself for what was happening. And he was a very good dad. So I hung on in there. Looking back, I don't know whether I should have hung in as long as I did. It's a real dilemma. My kids used to say, please don't leave him, Mum, please don't leave him. And because he was only doing it intermittently, what I did find out and it took me years and years to figure this out, is that because he loved me, all the things that I were doing in any other area other than drink, if I said, love, please don't do that, it's really hurting me, he would stop immediately. But when I said, please don't do that, it's hurting me, when I used to remonstrate about the kids and everything else, then he would then go off and drink. And I never understood why, and then I try and kind of police him. And then I go into rages and all of these things. I can never understand why he wasn't listening. And it took me years to figure out it was because he loved me so much that when I appealed to him, he felt such guilt and shame that I hit that wrong button by mistake. And then he'd go and drink again.
Yeah.
And this is something that we talk a lot in the work that we do.
Yeah.
So gradually, I began to do it differently. I figured out some strategies that began to work. And so we sat down and started talking about it, and we began to negotiate. I came off the heat. He then moved towards me. But he got cancer, and 9 months he couldn't drink at all. So ironically, he died really, really bravely because he couldn't get his drink, couldn't keep his drink down. So sadly, he died of cancer, but very bravely, without any drink, for 9 months. So that was our story, really, in terms of me living with an alcoholic. We loved each other to the end, but he never really, until he got cancer, got beyond what was going on inside.
Wow. And so can I ask a question? Because I know that you guys, you mentioned your story began that you met and then you went your separate ways, but then you found each other again. Can you share that?
Okay. We live in Devon now, not too far from where we first met.
It's the foot.
Yeah.
At the bottom. If you think of England, it's the foot down the bottom on the left-hand side.
Yeah. And it's a lovely little pastoral place. It's really, really pretty, and everybody wants to go on holiday there. Now, I was very restless in Scotland and had decided that I was going to hit the hippie trail to India. That was my idea. And I met some people and I was going to go with them, and we came to Devon first. And that was as far as I actually got, And while there, I met Lou. I met her, and naturally I was drunk when I met her, as an awful lot of the important things in my life seemed to happen when I was drunk, but then maybe it was the fact I was so drunk all the time, that anything happened that way. And we met in this pub, and I remember she came in, and she's hair way down to her hips, and she just looked absolutely gorgeous. And she came and she sat behind me, and I sort of looked, and through my drunken haze, I just saw this beauty, and I said, "Can I touch your hair?" And I thought. And then the next day, I was sitting on the beach, and I saw her walking towards me, whether she was coming toward me or just in my general direction, and it came back to me from the night before, and I thought, "Oh, please pass," because I was so embarrassed. But she came, she sat down, and we talked. But we didn't start going out or anything like that. The following year, I came back to Sidmouth in Devon again, and this time things had changed a lot because. I was one of the hippies on the beach at the time, and the first time I was there, and it was fine. You went and slept on the beach during the summer or in the seafront shelters. But things happened, and the police started to tighten up, and anybody who was sleeping rough, they were either throwing out of town or throwing in jail, either, So you had to play hide and seek from them. And what actually happened was that Lou came along in a van.
Yeah, can I speak? And just
yes, of course.
Me and my dad had made it up by then, and we were on speaking terms, and I was on speaking terms with God again. And we looked around at what was happening, and we just felt, as a church, we ought to mop up a bit of what was happening and offer something for these people that were just being taken by the police and kind of dumps. So along we came with a van. 3, 2, 1.
Yeah. Came along with a van and said, do you want somewhere to sleep tonight? And I thought, yes, of course I do, because then I didn't have to worry about the police. So I got in the back of this van. They took me back up to this house where there was a little commune, there. It was a little Christian commune, unbeknown to me. And as soon as we walked in, I got mugged, because they all sort of got around me and started to tell me about how I should give my life to God. And I was having none of it. I had no interest in this. I mean, sorry, done all that, bought the T-shirt. No, it's not interesting. And the next day, Lou's dad, the pastor, came in and she said, would you like to go and speak to him? And I went, well, if you want me to, but, So we went down the bottom of the garden, under an apple tree, very fittingly, and I have no idea what he said. Not a clue, Diane. I mean, he could have said anything. I don't know. All I remember is hanging onto his knees and crying like a baby. That's all I remember.
We were at the top of the house. Is anything happening? Well, he seems to be crying. That's what it gets.
Yeah, and I just, that was it. I just felt, wow, something has happened in my life, and it was lovely. It was a beautiful moment,
And that was pre the drunken that we talked about earlier, wasn't it? This was a kind of an earlier, this kind of get together with God, wasn't it?
It was an earlier get together with God. Yeah, this would be about 13 years before. I ended up in a psychiatric hospital. During that time, I took quite a lot of drugs. And, in fact, I was in quite a bad way in my head, taking an awful lot of LSD and stuff like that, so it was, they kind of saved me at that. Well, they saved my sanity, because by that time I was beginning to see things in 2D and, and it was going to get a wee bit worried about what was going on in my life. So that was us. We sort of started going out. And it was lovely. It was a lovely time. It was summer. It was Devon. We walked across the fields, and and they did all that sort of stuff, and looked into each other's eyes, and and then Lou had to go back to college up in London, and I was going to stay on in Devon in this place, but there was a big rally in London at the time called the Festival of Light. And so I went up there for that, and I ended up staying there. And I stayed there for a couple of months. And Lou was going back and forward to college, and she'd also joined a band which became quite famous, and it was a Christian band. And then one day she came in and said, "I don't think we should see each other anymore." So I did the brave thing and just said, "Well, if that's the way you feel about it, that's okay by me." And I walked around the corner, fell against this wall, crying like a baby, and thinking, I've been dumped, sad. And then shortly after that, I went back to Scotland. And I went back to Scotland with the sole purpose of, wiping my, sort of clearing my head and borrowing some money off of my parents and heading off again. That was exactly what I was going to do. And it turned out my father had cancer. And I thought, even I can't be that selfish that I could walk away again. And I ended up staying in Scotland. And I never went back on the road again after that, because that was actually an interesting time, and I was very, very thankful for that time. I'll just say this briefly, because my father and he couldn't really understand what was going on. I was a child of the 60s, and he had been in the war, and and I had to get hair down here in the beads and all of that, and he's just looking at me thinking, "Oh, what is this?" I don't understand it. Hate the music, hate everything about it, and we were just an argument looking for somewhere to happen all the time, because the problem was the man was an idiot, and I kept telling him that because he knew nothing.
This is
the arrogance of youth.
English humour here.
Yeah. It was that arrogance of youth. All of a sudden you hit your teens and you know everything.
Right.
Yeah, Google eat your heart out. So you just ask me. And so, and I had 3 months with him. And that 3 months, I'm really thankful for, because during that 3 months, I began to see him. He was the man. You know, he wasn't the idiot. I wasn't the font of all knowledge. I became his nurse. I became his chauffeur. I became his friend. And most of all, became his son, you know. And we saw each other as men. And it was a beautiful time for me, you know, because it was just so precious. Because all I could see of him before, even though I had idolized him when I was, you know, 12, 13, you know, during those teenage years, I just, you know, dismissed him. But I found him again, you know, and as I say, I'm so thankful for that period. But anyway, sorry, got lost there. Yeah.
A nice, sad but nice moment.
Lou and I lived two separate lives. We didn't hear from each other. We didn't see each other. We met once, very, very briefly, and had nothing to say to each other, you know, because we diverged. I had gone back to my life of, you know, drink, drugs, and rock and roll. You know, that was me again. And one day, fast forward 30 odd years, and I got this idea into my head that I needed to contact her. And I thought, why? You know, why do you contact somebody after all this time? You know, and I couldn't shift it. I couldn't shift this idea. So I did what everybody does, you know, Google. Well, ask Google, you know. So in I went, and it turned out that Lou was about, you know, one of only about 3 people in the world that didn't actually use the internet, you know, had nothing on the internet, and I couldn't find her. I could find 1 or 2 old pictures of her, you know, as a singing somewhere, or, you know, I found her a couple of her albums. I did that, but nothing about her. And I gave up. And then a friend of mine went to Ireland and to look at his family tree, and he told me about this website where you could, you know, research your family tree. So I went on it. And to be honest, it didn't really interest me that much. But while I was in there, I just typed Lou. And there she was. All the details that I wanted. Now, her husband had done this just before he died.
Literally, he got bored in those 9 months when he couldn't drink, so he decided he'd do our ancestry. Yeah. And so I should think just about a month before he came in, you found then that we were there.
So now I found it. I found that she was married, lived in Exeter, which is in Devon, you know, had 2 children. So, and I had her address. I thought, okay, what do I do with that? You know, do I turn up? You know, hiya, you know. I know you've been waiting for me all this time and I've arrived. Ta-da! What do you mean, who am I? You know, I mean, it's me, it's John, you know, your long lost love, I'm back. No, that didn't sound very sensible, did it, you know? So I thought, there's only one thing to do, just forget about it, you know, and I tried to forget about it. And I couldn't. But I'm a psychologist, so I know things, you know, so what you do is you have a catharsis, you know. So I got a piece of paper. Well, actually, it ended up 5 pieces of paper, and you write a letter. You write everything that you want, but you don't post it because that would just be silly, you know. So that's exactly what I did. But then I addressed it, and then I put it in my pocket. But I wasn't going to ever post this letter because, again, it would be silly. And then one day I passed a phone box, a letterbox, and I stuck it in a letterbox. And the next day the phone went. And it was, hello, it's Lou. And the hairs all went up the back of my neck. Because here's the past talking to me, you know? And
my bit of story now.
One last thing. One of the first things she said, and she just dropped it, you know, talk about mic drop. I mean, there's this, she said, I'm a widow. Now, why that should have any interest whatsoever I don't know, but the hairs all went up in the back of my neck.
Again.
And I don't think I heard anything for about the next 10 minutes, you know. But all of a sudden, we talked for 2 hours, you know, as if we just, I'm just nicking out for 35 years. I hold that thought, you know. That's what it was like.
Yes.
It's all yours.
What was really interesting, but we found this out later, that when he became a Christian years and years ago, I gave him a Bible, and that letter arrived, and I'm not joking, 35 years later to the day, that letter arrived. We didn't realize it till much later.
No.
Well, I was widowed 2 months, knew perfectly well, shouldn't go near anybody for 2 years. I knew my stuff, you know, you need to grieve and all that stuff. But he wrote about drink, and he wrote about his testimony and all that he'd been through. And it was the one bit that caught my attention, because I thought, here's somebody that's been through the sort of thing that I've been through, only from the opposite side. And so my curiosity was, I think, peaked at that point. So again, on a bit of impulse, I rang him up, and it was like you just walked out the door and come in the next day. It was really amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it was stilted for a few minutes, and it just flowed, you know, and it was just that kind of, you know, and another thing, and it, you know, and then she said, well, I'll phone you in a couple of weeks. And I thought, no, I want you to phone me again now, you know. I want you to phone me tomorrow, and you know, and it was so exciting, so exciting, and you know, I mean, I had no idea where it was going to lead, but it was just exciting, you know.
So we did fall in love very quickly, but I was absolutely terrified. I mean, this is an ex-alcoholic. My psyche quite rightly was saying, "You're doing what? You're falling in love with whom?" So I put him through absolute hell, because I kept saying, "I don't think I can do this." No, because I don't know if anybody knows this, but commitment phobia does not come in the door saying, "Hello, I'm commitment phobia. I want you to know what's going on." It comes and it creeps over you like a kind of massive dread. And the only thing that stopped the dread was for me to say to him, "I don't think we can do this." But being a psychologist, he was really, really, really good. And he just used to say patiently over and over again, "Well, we don't have to do this, Lou. And if you don't want to have a relationship, it's okay." And literally, he let me go and I came back. He let me go and I came back. And gradually, and I have to say this, I'm so thankful, because if he'd gone into, personalized it, I don't think we would have been together. But he loved me and loved me and loved me until I was safe enough to really give him my heart back.
And he understood that. He saw it from and he gave you your time to begin to build that trust and open up. That's absolutely beautiful. I mean, that's
Well, yeah, I mean, there's an old saying, you know, if you have a bird in your hand, you know, and you squeeze it and then open it, it'll fly away. But if you just leave your hand open, you know, and it comes back to you, and it's because it wants to, you know, and you know, I mean, I've lost people in my life along the way. I have to say that when we did actually first get together, I mean, I was 20 years sober. I mean, I wasn't sober a week, you know, I was 20 years into it, you know, so it was a long time. And, you know, and there was a stability about it. But interestingly, and this I've found fascinating, you know, because when I was in Scotland and was working in the university and was a researcher, and people knew me by reputation. They knew, and all that time I kept it secret. Well, it was probably a really badly kept secret, but I kept it secret that I was a recovering alcoholic. I didn't want, and the reason for that was because I wanted people to take me seriously as a researcher. I didn't want them to think, oh, here's somebody with an axe to grind, you know. Because if you're going to do good research, you need to have a sort of open mind about it, you know, rather than go in, because there's too many people go and try to prove that they're right, you know, rather than investigate, you know, and that's bad science. And I really wanted to be seen as a scientist. And so I never really told people about it. And what's been fascinating is that people respected me because of the degrees I had. And now people are not that interested.
Mm.
What they're interested in is the fact I'm an alcoholic. They think that is, incredible. They think this is wonderful, and I think, and I think, it was because I was an alcoholic that Lou and I are together now, which is ironic,
Mm.
because if I hadn't talked about my alcoholism at that point, I don't think we would have, it would have happened, So it shows that, people who have recovered, or are recovering, that there is life out there. There's a lot of hope out there,
Yeah.
But the hope comes with the work. It doesn't come, just as a right. It's not grace. It doesn't just happen, But if you work at it, then there's no reason why not, And it was a beautiful time getting to know each other again.
Mm-hmm.
And it was funny because we would go around saying, look, I'm not looking for a relationship. And Lou would go, no, I'm not looking for a relationship, and we would reassure each other about half a dozen times a day, we're not looking for a relationship. But as I've said, the only way to decide who wanted a relationship less was get married. It was the only way to solve it.
British humour again.
Yeah.
I think a couple of things too, just to pick up on the kind of the God thing. Because you were very disillusioned, weren't you, about Christianity?
Oh, extremely disillusioned. I was very much.
So when we met up, the first weekend, I was woken to the voice of God saying, "I want you to give John a word." So I said, "Really? Now?" So I muttered and moaned at God a fair amount, but it was so real. I knew it was real. So I kind of muttering and moaning some more, but I knew he was sent to do it. So I said, I've got something to say to you, didn't you? Because you thought I was going to finish with you again.
Yep. Yeah, I did.
But I didn't. But I just started speaking, just to say what happened, because I think is very remarkable about the real God, who is the true God.
I think, my feelings about Christianity and religion and all that was that, I was sure narrow-minded bigots, and I really didn't want to become a narrow-minded bigot, In truth, I was already a narrow-minded bigot. I didn't need religion to help me, I was already there, but in a slightly different way. And so anyway, Lou had said, before we were going to go back to Sidmouth, and it was almost, go back to where we met and all this. But before we do, I need to tell you something. I have a message from God. And I thought, yep, okay, this is an unusual start to a date. But however, because I'm not used to having girlfriends, deliver messages from God, but however, fire away. And she started talking. And basically, I can't remember the verbatim, but what I can remember was that she said, God has watched your journey, and he loves what you have done, and it ended with, and there was lots of things
and
in about
he was
that.
really proud of your
Oh, yes,
journey.
I'm really proud of your journey.
Really affirming.
Yeah. And at the end of it, he said, I will never diminish you. I just ask that you never diminish me. And it was powerful. It really hit me. It's funny how, and this is one of the things that I have discovered about, God, is that, he says something that hits you and you think, yeah, it's so obvious. That's been a hole that's been there forever. But also it's a revelation in that moment, because where did that hole come from? I never noticed that before. But really, really, it's there. And you've just been walking around it. And that was one of the things that I was walking around. Getting sober, yes, I had made amends with myself. I'd made amends with other people. I'd made amends to the past. But really, I wasn't that keen on me just yet.
Mm.
I was keener than I had been.
Mm-hmm.
But, and still to this day, there is a wee bit of a sort of low self-esteem at times. It can raise its head, but it doesn't have the power that it had before. It had the power to cripple me before.
Right.
But, it's a bit like having a sore ankle now. You just get used to the fact it's there, and you limp a bit. Do you know what I mean? It's there, and you just accept it.
I have to say,
but that day, it just kind of went into the heart of it, and I just felt affirmed in a way that I'd never felt before, and it was wonderful.
I have to say that, I've worked quite a lot with adult victims of survivors of sexual abuse, and I think the thing that has slain me most in terms of my faith is the therapeutic heart of God.
Mm-hmm.
That where people are most broken, where they most hate themselves, where they most feel shame and guilt. That was just a classic God that actually right into that heart of, I don't know if you want me, because if you knew what I was really like. And then God saying, I know what you're like, and I really love you, and I'm really proud of your journey and your struggle. And I think to us as Christians, sometimes we don't even want to call ourselves Christians, because some of the stuff out there is very different to the God that we know loves us.
Mm-hmm.
But to us, the essence of our God is a therapeutic heart who loves us more clearly, dearly, and wonderfully than we can ever possibly imagine.
Yeah.
And I want to say that because there is a lot of stuff out there that calls itself Christianity that breaks our hearts, basically.
Yeah.
We don't judge it. We're just really sad about it. And God to us unfailingly has been kind and loving and good.
It took, I almost had to be dragged kicking and screaming to get there, but after I got there, I was thought, why was I putting up all that fight, because it is something that's kind of followed me through my life, right from when I was a child, and I was, I was an altar boy, and then I was training to be a priest, and so it's been there in one form or another all through my life, but a lot of the time I've been running away from it, been playing hide and seek with God. The thing is, he's better at it than I
am. That's actually how Bottled Up began.
Yeah.
Is that we'd been going out, for about 3 months?
On and off, yes. It was very slow at the beginning, and then it kind of, I can't even remember why it happened, but all of a sudden it kind of, we would sort of talk on the phone maybe, once every fortnight, and then it was once every week, and then all of a sudden it just, took off.
Yeah. My friends were really great about it, actually, because they realized I loved my husband when he died, but I wasn't in love with him. The romance goes really early on, doesn't it, when you're living with a drinker. So actually, we were in a cafe near Exeter, and I had what I think I'd have to describe as a kind of a vision, but I started hearing all this crying and wailing, and apart from looking around to see if there was a child, I knew enough about God at that point to know that there was something happening that was a kind of a vision. And so I kind of started crying, trying to comfort John, because I knew he'd wonder what was going on, think that there was something going on between me and him. And I heard these wails and cries, and I said, what is this, God? He said, these are the cries of the people that are living with drinkers, and they have broken my heart, and I want you both to put up a work so that you can begin to reach out to them. So that's how Bottled Up began, with a kind of a call from God to do it.
What had happened before this is I was working in the Centre for Alcohol and Drug Studies. It was in a part of the university up in Paisley, just outside Glasgow. And at the time, I got really interested in the therapeutic use of the internet. And I've been asked to write some distance learning materials for Hong Kong University and things like that. So I did that at that time, and I thought, this is really interesting. Why don't we, harness this? And so I found somebody who had an internet business and, the website business, and with a very good programmer, and we wrote this website for drinkers. And it was a therapeutic website. It took people through a program. And I had just kind of launched this before Lou and I got together. And as we started to talk about, how could we help families of drinkers? Because as we looked around, there really wasn't that much around. There was Al-Anon, and a lot of people didn't like Al-Anon at all for one reason or another. And that was about it. Most rehabs excluded families. They didn't, this was a private thing between, the drinker and the rehab. And you think, this is crazy. But however, that's what they did. And at the time, all the advice that was given was, get out, run, throw them out. That was it. There was no real alternative. So we started to look at this. And what we decided to do was we would, since I already had a website, maybe we could write something else. And at the time, people looked at it and said, oh, no, you can't do that. You have to be in the room with people. You have to give them cups of tea and hugs. That's the only way you can do therapy. And we go, no, you can do it other ways. Then, of course, COVID happened, and all of a sudden, everybody's doing it online. Everybody's doing it with Zoom. Everybody, and they go, do you know you can do this online? We go, yes, we've been saying this for years, So that was, we started to write the website. I retired from the university, and because Lou had dependents, I didn't, and if we were going to get together properly, then I needed to come down from Scotland down to Devon.
That's children not dependent on alcohol. It's in England that means children. I don't know what the word's doing.
She had a sick mother. She had a teenage daughter, and she had a son who was in care. So, it made sense for me to come down. So that's what I did. I retired from the university, came down, and we started this Bottled Up. And what we did was we looked at our qualifications, and so Lou is a therapist because she trained as a therapist later, but she also has personal experience. So she got professional, she got personal experience. I'm a doctor of psychology, taught all about alcohol and drugs, but I'm also have personal experience, lots of it, So I don't know that if we are unique, but we're certainly a rare combination. So that's what we did. We started to write it, and we started to write this program, and we started to kind of slant it in a slightly different way, that we were saying that, you're not actually powerless. Okay, you're powerless to actually change the person, but you can start and change the circumstances. You can start and change things in your life and to make it yourself more resilient, to make it much easier on yourself. And in doing that, then maybe what will happen is that, the drinker starts to change. And one of the things that people kept saying to us, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And we go, yeah, that's true. But you can gallop it and make it thirsty, And that's the approach that we took. If you can change, the environment that the drinker, so that it's not reinforcing the drinking to the same extent, then things start to change. What Lou was talking about earlier on about the negotiation, if you're going to drink, please don't sit and drink in front of the television, because, all the time when the kids are here, and because it doesn't work for the family. Might work for you, but it doesn't work for the family, because one of the big, and you'll know yourself, one of the big problems with being with a drinker is that sometimes they're sitting there. Two things can happen. One is they never shut up, and it's like it's like a broken record that just goes round and round and round, saying the same things over and over and over again, and can't remember them the next day. Or alternately, they sit there and it's silence, lights on, nobody home. But emotionally, they're not there. They're not present. They're not present to have this relationship with. And if they are talking, then they're boring. I know. I was a bit of an alcoholic and I was extremely boring, but it was so interesting in my own head, I wondered why people all left and went, oh, you know, oh, I must just tell you about the, please, bye. You know, they'd gone.
I think the program is understandable if you say that the first thing we do is we say stop.
Yeah.
That's the first bit of the program, is stop doing things that don't work.
Yeah.
Start doing things. Again, take care of yourself. We make it very, very clear, and I want to say it here, that absolutely we believe some people need to get out and need to get out quick. And we go through that right at the beginning. No way do we ever want to encourage people to stay that need to go.
Safety's part of it.
Yeah. So just in case anyone's listening, but there are a lot of people, and people have come to us and said that are not ready to go. Sometimes I feel that it's a bit like a descending spiral, really, that, you know, sometimes you do get there, but it takes a while. So we understand that. And one of the things we say, if you put this in place, you might go in the end. But you can say to your children, to yourself, I've done everything I can to make this work and it isn't working. So we will encourage you and support you to go as well as to stay. So I think it's really important we say that publicly.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the sense of, in my situation, my ex was a violent individual.
Absolutely.
So I had to leave. It was because it was not only emotionally abusive, not, you know, he was emotionally and mentally and physically abusive. So it was a combination of a lot, and so it came to the point where my story was that where I had to officially end it, because in our relationship it was a breakup, we make up. Break up, we make up. He would separate and then he would come back, and he was constantly getting himself into trouble, doing a lot of wasn't the man that I initially fell in love with. He was, when he drank, he became a completely different, violent person, and did not care who he hurt and who he damaged along the way. And the last final thing was where I had to end it was when he attempted to kill me, you know, and that was, and it's sad because my self-esteem was so very low at the time. I didn't leave him for me. I left him because of my children. It was the fact that my children would be orphans. So, and a lot of times I always say, because of a person's self-esteem. So you can be a man also with a female, whichever, it doesn't matter the gender. You could be with an alcoholic, and your self-esteem is so low that you sometimes dismiss the damage, the psychological, the physical damage, or even the harm that it can lead to death.
Yeah.
But if you have something else, in my case was my children, that was what made me, because I was like, I can't have these children orphaned, because if I go, where are they going to go? Who's going to take, you know, he's going to be the one. And God knows I did not want that. So that was my wake up moment, my aha moment, my epiphany was when New Year's Eve, he was strangling me. And for the grace of God, the intervention was great. God intervened, that the doorbell rang. We had guests. Had that guest did not arrive while he was strangling, I would have been dead and my children would have been orphaned. And so, and that was a thing. That was the thing where I said, I have to live for my children. And sometimes, and I say this out for listeners that are listening out there, women or men, you may not have that self-esteem to want to live for yourself. But if you have children, if that's your thing, for me, that was my thing. I have to live for them. And then eventually I started building on myself. I started working on myself in the therapy and going through all that. And now I love me. I love and I adore me. And I look back and I say, gosh, and look at the young woman back then, because I was such a young and naive, and because this was my first love, my first everything, you know, when I met him. And that was, I look back and you should have loved yourself a little bit more, but that's okay. But now you love you, you know, and so that healing process. But yes, I share that. So I'm glad that you did say that. So when you need to get out, you need to get out. I mean, like, you know.
I mean, mine was he was an annoying drunk, my husband, and I definitely stayed as a mother. I didn't stay as his wife because my children begged me to stay. And he wasn't doing all the things that make us leave. Coercive control is more complicated because I think there's coercive control in most drink relationships. And so if you technically looked at coercive control, you'd kind of all walk out. But the heart is if you love someone and they love you, and this is the thing with me, my husband hated what he was doing. And I knew him well enough to know that he didn't want to be like that. So you kind of hang on in there for him as well when you love, or your partner, So it's a complicated thing, isn't it, the journey? But yours sounds fairly straightforward. It sounded awful. I'm so glad you got out. It sounded dreadful. I'm sorry you went through that. And wonderful, the journey that you've made, because you are lovely. I can see that.
Thank you. I think that it's looking back, and I think, John, you said this earlier, it's in spite of that, whatever the journey is awful and we go through, but it made us who we are today. You said something a little bit earlier. People aren't interested in hearing about, your degree and all this, your education, all, but they want to hear your story of redemption, how you came back, how you were able to, and it all revolves around your alcoholism, where you were an alcoholic and and so people want to hear that story. And it's what made you the man that you are today, that you're able to speak to others from experience, on lived experience. And so, yeah, my journey is also in that way. It was difficult, hard, and everything, but I'm able to understand what it's like to hate yourself, not love yourself that much, to say, I value me more than, in not getting out sooner. But what was more important to me, and that was my life saving, my life vest, was my children. That was like where I was like, that's it, no more.
No, I think, looking back in it, I remember going to one of the first AA meetings I ever went to. And we were sitting in a circle and everybody was, my name's Thomas, I'm an alcoholic. And then this guy next to me, I can't remember what his name was, it doesn't matter. My name is Cecil. He said, I'm an alcoholic. He says, and I'm glad to be an alcoholic. And I just looked, what? Now, I can't say that today, but I understand what he means. If that hadn't happened, if I hadn't ended up in those rooms at that time, I wouldn't be the person that I am today. Now, what I would be today, I don't know, but I wouldn't be this person, and that's for sure, because these were the building blocks. And I've often thought that what happened with Lou and I is that we parted company, went on our training courses, and came back together again. There were really long training courses and sometimes very, very painful ones, but that's what made us. And we ended up coming back together again for a reason. And this is the reason. The reason is bottled up. And it took us a wee while to really start and understand that and understand the significance of it. But it's been amazing, We looked at one time, we thought, we're going to be, millionaires because we're going to, and we ended up, we realized, no, we've got to give this away. We've got to make it free, and that's what it is. It's free. We wrote a book, some time ago, right at the beginning, we wrote the book, Bottled Up. And since then, I've written, and I wrote another book at the time as well about first steps out of problem drinking. But recently I wrote a book which is about a life story, and that came out just last month. And what's interesting about that is following the threads through, connecting it. And it's only, we have 20/20 hindsight, we look back and go, that's what that was about. That's what was interesting there, but we have been given, the personal experiences that we were given meant that when we came to write Bottled Up, we put ourselves in the family's head, and we could sit and we could think it through. Sometimes we were at odds because, I'm coming at it from an alcoholic head and Lou's coming at it from a family head, but we kind of worked it through. And what we did was we started to make put together a suite of tools, like the 4 Ps, which is about things, you probably shouldn't do. It's natural to do them, but they just don't work, things like picking a fight, and punishing and, policing and
pleading.
and pleading,
My good one.
These things are the things that you do, but they don't work. They don't have the effect that you think they should have, and they don't. And then we did put another one together called Share, which is about, if you argue with your drinker about, you drink too much. Oh, no, I don't. Oh, yes, you do. And everybody knows somebody that drank more than them, more often than them, have greater consequences than them. And if you talk about drinking, then you're not going to get very far. So we talk about Share, which is the consequences of drinking, which is about safety, it's about the health, it's about ambition, it's about your relationships, it's about environment. And you start to look at these and you start to... But what that also does is it gives you ammunition to say, yeah, okay, let's put a boundary down here. If they're not going to stop drinking, then maybe we can sort of reduce the consequences, the impact on the family. And the other one that we have is Love, which is about, letting the negative things happen, optimizing your time when they're actually sober, because if getting sober means that things get worse, then it's not a great advert for getting sober and stopping drinking, So you giving them a glimpse of it. V is about valuing the drinker, because it's so easy to get into hating the drinker. My wife, when she left me, said, I don't love you anymore, I don't like you anymore, and I'm leaving before I hate you. We kind of made it up later, but we never got back together again. And then the last one is about encouraging them to go. So we tell people about these tools, and so we come at it from a more of a loving point of view, because all our tools, they're all named, they're all positive names. We had a lot of fun, making up less positive names.
Got them out of the way first.
Yeah, but that got them out of the way, But we try to make it positive, try and make it positive all the time. Doesn't always work. But one of the things that if people work their way through this program and they end up leaving at the end, at least they can turn around and say, I tried.
Yeah, that's what we said just now. I tried. Yeah.
And there isn't that, what if I had, if only, what about,
So yes, I mean, that's the thing. When you live with a drinker, it's very easy to see all the negativity, and then it's very easy to then just feed back to the person who's feeling awful about themselves. And as psychologists, we know that doesn't work with children, doesn't work with anybody really. So we do try and get the positivity and affirming and calling out the person you still love, who's still in there. And I think to just remind them of the value of them gives them something, like John said, to begin to rise up towards, so it has impacted a lot of people.
Yes, it has.
But
well, one of the things that's lovely about it, every now and again we think,
they're a hard lot to help.
We're struggling to keep it afloat, financially, and then we get an email in that says, you changed their lives, and that's the currency that we work to. That's what makes it beautiful. Anyway, do you have any other questions, or have we ran out of everybody else's time as well?
Because I was actually looking at that. We're at time, and I think that you and I, all three of us, could just sit there and talk hours and hours, because this is such a many-layered conversation. I mean, we can talk about the different perspectives and everything. I am so honored and so thankful that you have chosen Life and In Between, our podcast, to trust us to share your stories. Thank you so much for that. Thank you. And we are so honored for that, and we're so grateful. I did want to ask, for anyone that wants to reach out to you, where are the best point of contacts that you have? And I will put that in the description as well. But a listener currently now say, I want to know exactly. I know you're at bottledup.com, or please tell me where they can be, where you can be reached.
Okay, I will send you the links and you can put them in. There are three things possible. One is bottled-up.com, And that's our website. That's got the whole, all the kind of contact details that you want in it.
And it's free.
Yeah, and it's a free website. Within that, you can actually book a one-to-one with me, but that's not free. You know, we charge for that, and what we charge for that pays for the website. You know,
Okay.
and the third thing is, you know, I've just written a book called a No Cloistered Life, and again, it talks about my journey mostly, but of course, it talks on, you know, Lou and I getting together, you know, so that's...
People seem to really love it. We've got some really good feedback.
Yeah, we've got a lot of good feedback. And that's,
it's a good yarn.
And again, people don't come up and say, that's really great that you got a degree. They come up and say, that's wonderful that you've recovered from alcoholism. And I go, here we go again.
It's really hopeful. People living with a drinker, when you read his story, then you know that anyone can change.
Yeah. So,
and they can find your book on Amazon, or where can they find your book?
Amazon.
You'll find it in Amazon, but it's also in any other kind of good bookstores.
Okay.
If it's in the States, I'm not sure. But again, I'll send you the link.
Okay.
And can I just say that you've just been a wonderful hostess? Because
you're so warm and loving.
And not only that, you're very generous, because you've just given us lots and lots of space to talk, and that's really, it's lovely.
So we honor you too very, very much. Thank you so much. It's lovely to meet you.
It is, and like I always tell my guests, and I'll share this with you. You are now part of our Life in Between Familia family. Anytime that you would like to join us, to talk, to share your story, to be words of encouragement, you want something, you know, to talk about your website, or if you write another book, please know that you can reach out to us. We will pencil you in. We will get you in. You're not part of the family, you know? So even though we're across the seas, we're on the other side of the world, but you could still reach out and we can still connect again, and we can have another conversation like this, a very empowering conversation. And one final thing that I do want to ask before we close it out and everything. John, I have a question for you. Well, and Lou, I have another one. So separately, because it's Life and In Between podcasts, we have listeners who are listening here. What are one final in-between moment, or words of encouragement, or a golden nugget that you can leave a person, for example, John, that's right now trying to find sobriety, or trying to just get the degree or something, you know?
I think there's always hope. Always hope. That, you know, even in the darkest times, you know, you can find hope. And I know sometimes you listen to people, and I did it a lot. I'd listen to people and say, you know, what a load of sanctimonious crap, you know. But there was something in what they said, and they hung on to it, you know. And yeah, you can make it. People can make it, because there's millions of us who have recovered. Millions of us. It's not just one or two, and it's not just the special ones, you know, because I wasn't any special one, you know. It's anybody can do it. It's open to anybody, you know. That's what I would say.
Thank you. And Lou, what would you like to leave final messages to our listeners?
I would say, if you're living with a drinker, one thing you'll find bottled up. I spent years sincerely and honestly doing things that really didn't work, and spent hours, and I got so exhausted. And what we have done and bottled up is I've shared the thing, you know. So learning what not to do if you live with a drinker is almost more important than what you're trying to do, because there's lots of things that don't work, and we spend hours living with drinkers doing them over and over again. So find knowledge, find good knowledge with people that know what they're talking about. And then you're putting your energy, because you're so exhausted when you live with a drinker, you'll then put your energy towards things that have a chance of working.
Thank you so much.
Can I just add something to that?
Absolutely.
Because if you are living with a drinker, please don't circle the wagons. Don't sort of, you know, get into secrecy.
That's so important.
Because what happens is that, you know, addiction thrives in secrecy. But also, you know, what you need somebody to talk to. You need somebody that you can,
That's so good. It's so true.
And it is true. It is true. You need to come out of the secrecy. Yeah. And it's not betrayal. No. It's not betrayal. It's about finding help for yourself. It has other effects as well, but it's about finding help for yourself. And, and there's an advert on TV, which has the immortal words, "You're worth it." Remember it. You're worth it, and please do that, and there's so many people come along and they talk to me and they go, wow, I thought I was the only one.
Yes.
And it's because we're all in silos all over the place, all hidden away.
And we say this on Bottled Up. The reason we did it is because you matter. Yeah. What you're going through matters. The pain that you're feeling matters. And we want to reach out. We want to be there for you.
And people...
We're off now.
People like you who are allowing this to be shared,
Yes.
That helps. That really helps. That cuts through some of the secrecy. And it's really worth it, And you just shared about yourself. Again, that's so helpful. So helpful to people, So thank you for that. And thank you for what you do. Yeah. It's cool.
Bless you.
Thank you. And for our listeners out there, please, 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 if you hear, you're listening to this episode and you hear and you know that there's someone that needs to hear this, please share it. Share it with your loved ones, your friends, anyone out there that needs to hear this. I also like to let you know that please go to this website, go to Bottled Up. Please look into it. It is free. It's wonderful. Look at John's book. Go to Amazon. I will be posting all the links. And for those that haven't started following us, please, you know where we're at. We're at Spotify, YouTube, all social medias out there. We are there. And one last final word that I want to say to everyone, like, subscribe, share, but that you matter. I love what you guys said. You guys matter. This is why Life and In Between podcast exists. And we have wonderful guests like John and Lou coming on to let you know that you matter. So I want to say peace and love.